Welcome to Divcasts from University of Chicago Divinity School. For more of our podcasts and information about our terms of use, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts.
All right, folks, I think we'll convene here. Most of you know me. I'm Aaron. I'm Associate Coordinator for Craft Teaching, and we are thrilled to be collaborating with the Religion and Literature Club to bring Professor Britt back to UC. Just a couple announcements, and I'll turn things over to them. Our next craft teaching event is the big one for the quarter. It's the Dean's Seminar with Chancellor Rebecca Chop of Denver University. We already have a lot of RSVPs. There may be 1 or 2 lunches left, but please do send us an email if you would like lunch. We may be able to fit you in. And I guess if you're interested in craft teaching credit, you do need to sign in. That's our only way of collecting you. So please do that. And coffee will be here shortly. I have been promised. And so we'll just quietly gather. I know I will need to interrupt the proceedings and grab some coffee. But with that, I'll turn things over to Matt Marini to introduce Professor Britt.
All right. Thank you all for coming. It's an honor and pleasure to have Professor Brian grace us with his presence for the weekend. Professor Britt is a graduate of the Religion and Literature program, receiving his PhD in 1992, and he's currently chair of the Department of Religion and Culture at Virginia Tech. Professor Britt will discuss some key elements of religious studies curricula and departments, with a focus on the challenging transition from graduate student teacher to faculty member. The workshop is intended to help people understand and articulate how their teaching fits into wider departmental and institutional contours, and to develop language and tools for negotiating disciplinary and interdisciplinary expectations in the field of religious studies. Professor Britt will offer a second talk this afternoon at 4:30 on his current research on Walter Benjamin. It will start at 4:30 and go until 6 o'clock in Swift 106. It is a pleasure to have Professor Britt with us.
I suggest we just take a moment and
the coffee's here.
get some
I have a
coffee.
handout that I think will distribute around. And maybe what we could do while why don't you go ahead and get coffee? Shoot paper handout so that maybe no judgment, but I was asked to suggest a kind of little exercise to prepare. But my question is, did you have a chance to do that little exercise? And again, no judgment on whether you did. How many say yes? Okay, great. So what we'll do is we will have time. I want this to be a very interactive session, and we'll have time to do that exercise. And I'd be really interested in your experience of thinking about that. And maybe what we might do is work in pairs, and then after you sort of exchange your experience of doing that exercise, maybe present it back to us. I have a kind of outline that I prepared, and it's quite flexible. It tends to become more and more sort of happy talk as we go through it, and silly and punchy. So you'll have to forgive me for that. What I thought we might do then is do that exercise in the third part of the talk. So let me just say a little bit about my main goal here, my understanding of this session. My understanding of the Craft of Teaching series is that it's designed very much to help you think about the transition from the research work you do as graduate students to the teaching work you'll do in your careers. The aim of this session is to add a slightly different element to that conversation in the way of thinking about institutional context, administrative issues. I think part of why I'm here, or one of the reasons you invited me, is that I have an administrative role, and I'm happy to talk about my experiences, but I'm very interested in thinking with you about how some preparation for the institutional context and the administrative world that would welcome you might be of use as well. And I'm particularly aware of this from personal experience as a person who made this transition, as well as someone who has watched others make it, including others from the University of Chicago Divinity School. So I think it could be a useful conversation. So again, the goals of this session are to talk about some of these issues facing new faculty of religion in the areas of curriculum and departmental context. And then also maybe, I think there's an argument to this presentation is to suggest some ways to integrate all of your skills and interests as you make that kind of transition. And I guess behind that argument is an assumption that sometimes it's easy to draw a line between the intellectual purity or the research life of the scholar on the one hand, and the sort of realities of the institutional teaching and administrative and committee work on the other. And so I'm actually interested in challenging that boundary a little bit in some of the ways that we'll talk together. So I think one of the main metaphors of the presentation that I would offer is kind of the metaphor of reading or the model of reading. I find it useful to consider, again, especially for those of you who are religion and literature students, consider the skill of reading that you cultivate as a skill that can transfer to the learning about the institutional context of the department, of the college, of the university, and each of those is its own context. And again, I'm happy to talk about how that works in my experience, but you can probably already think about how that works in your experience if you think about the area of the Divinity School you're in, the Divinity School itself, how it relates to the overall university. And there may be things that you might not even realize about that. The money question is one of those things. I don't know much about the budget of the University of Chicago. I think Professor Rosengarten does, but that's just in the background. Okay, so governance structure is another thing I think to read, to pay attention to. How are decisions made? What are the rules for that? Most of that is public knowledge. Most of that should be accessible, whether you're at a state or a private institution. How are decisions made? How does it work? And it's very useful to know all this. And I have to also say a word of caution for all of this, and that is, this is not stuff that you should actually have to worry about doing when you start. But knowing about it will help. So in the case of faculty, when we hire faculty at Virginia Tech, it's clear that they are not going to do committee work from the beginning. And they're not expected to do all sorts of service and that kind of stuff. And so I would strongly urge you to keep that in mind, that many institutions will actually encourage you not to do this kind of hands-on committee work and so on. But at the same time, I think it's never a bad thing to know how it works as early as possible. Governance structure. The formal and informal cultures, you'll get this right away. You'll get it as a job candidate. People will start telling you how it really is. They'll take you into their confidence, and they'll tell you secrets, and they'll reveal certain kinds of political issues, and the terrain will unfold. And so that's important to think about reading as well. There are also these formal cultures, so you'll need to know what are the traditions of the department, of the institution? What are the things that come around every year at the same time? And what do they mean to the people who uphold those traditions? Resource questions, again, this is not something you have to make decisions on or be a committee member for, but it's really good to know about from the standpoint of being a new colleague. What are the factors in the background of resource allocations? and that will change from time to time and institution to institution. We are facing enrollment challenges for the first time in about 18 years at Virginia Tech in the humanities, and that's a national trend. There's a national decline in humanities enrollments since the financial crisis of 2008. I think we probably hit bottom and maybe we're coming back up. And but it's just something that enrollments is one of those things that changed on us in the humanities.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
Was that related in any way to changing graduation requirements at the university or not?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Good question. Yeah, your name is?
Jessica.
Jessica. Okay. Yeah, not at all. And please jump in at any time. No. And there were people gaming the graduation requirements.
Huh.
And I'll withhold details for now, but people, for example, there are 8 colleges at Virginia Tech, and more STEM-related colleges created courses that satisfy gen ed requirements. And another thing that happened is that 1 or 2 gen ed courses grew very, very large and drained enrollments. But mostly it was a change in this, it was a reflection of this national climate change, I think. So yeah, it's an interesting issue. But just being aware of this, paying attention to it, budget issues, to the extent that your institution shares this information, it's really good to know about. And I believe that faculty, at least at state universities, faculty should know a lot about budget. And in fact, state universities usually have to publish a lot of information about budget, including salaries. It's public information. So budget is a category. Classrooms even can be a category. The size of a classroom, the capacity of a classroom. So when someone is working with you on what course you might teach and what time of day you might teach it, that person, that scheduler, is thinking about the classrooms and the fire code. Every room, maybe this room, well, Chicago doesn't follow those kinds of rules, but normally rooms have capacity limits and so on like that. So it's just stuff to think about. It's dumb stuff. But it helps to just be aware of it. What are the service expectations for new faculty? And how are they treated? How are they viewed by the senior faculty? And again, this is formal and informal stuff. Thinking about it is important. Who's in charge? Really, who's in charge? Who cares and who really cares about the department, about the college? Who's really the one showing up? Who's the one ordering the coffee or getting the room scheduled or bringing in the speaker? Those are the people to be aware of, and who's just kind of phoning it in. And again, you'll be able to read all this. You'll be able to tell this from being in the context, and it's good to know that kind of thing. The change, the challenging change, the second part of this, and again, jump in at any time, but we'll be more interactive in the third part at least. So, this idea, the Heideggerian idea of thrownness, I mean, we find ourselves in a completely new context, and it's not like the other context. And forgive me if this sounds in any way patronizing. I don't want it to sound patronizing. But it's a big, big change. And I'm sure you've been hearing this at every one of these sessions. And so reading that context, being alert to what that change involves is very, very important. And then also kind of monitoring your own reaction, your own response to that as it happens is quite important, I think. How do they see you fitting in? When you're interviewed for a position, you can tell from what people ask you and what they say what their idea of you is. And do they have an I-it relationship with you? Do they imagine you as the one who's going to fill a gap in the curriculum or a service course? Are you the one who's going to burnish the reputation of the research side of the department? Are you going to be the one who contributes to the social life of the department? I actually hear this every time we do a search. People say, that's someone I want to have coffee with. And I have mixed feelings about that kind of reasoning, and I hope you can understand why. That's great. It's great if that works out for people. But it's important to be aware of and alert to these kinds of dynamics as you are making your way into an institution. How do they see you? What is their idea of you? Where do you want to fit in? What do you see as opportunities for yourself? Every school now is moving more and more toward a slightly, I'm going to generalize. Many schools are moving toward a more entrepreneurial way of distributing resources. There are internal grant competitions. There are internal award competitions. There are course releases for different kinds of projects and initiatives. What are those opportunities? How can you take advantage of them? What is your agenda, and how do those opportunities offer some way to enhance your agenda, your personal professional goals? So it's good to pay attention to those. Who or what is the administration? I've noticed, I always have this image that less attractive building on the quad is the administration building. I admit I have somewhat, it doesn't create the same warm feelings as other buildings on the quad create. And I think that's why I put it in quotation marks. So people talk about the administration, but what is it? Is the administration people who are faculty like you, who want to do their best? Is it people who are careerists, who are hoping to build up their resume with 1 or 2 projects and move on to the next place? That's really important to pay attention to as well. Is this person checked in or checked out? What's this person's motivation? The chair or the dean? Maybe the president and provost, maybe. But likely you won't really be burdened with needing to know all that. But it's good to have a sense, again. So read that carefully. And, the idea of the people I've known who've made this transition, many of them suffer a little with the transition. And there's a lot of difficulty that people endure and go through. And so, but that's the way it is for everyone. People with tenure also feel uncertain. There's no reason to think that your sense of uncertainty or your sense of doubt or anxiety is greater than the person next to you or the other people in the department, even the veterans. Those people feel threatened by you because you're smarter than they are, or they're afraid you're smarter than they are. So lots of dynamics there, but a warning not to assume that you're the only one feeling that kind of way is I guess what I'm thinking there. Critical thinking, irony, and care of the self. These are again unsolicited pieces of advice. Does your critical imagination help with the problems and challenges, or does it make them worse? Are you inclined? Is your imagination good enough to imagine paranoid scenarios? Probably. You're all smart enough, I'm guessing, to think of the most scary paranoid scenario for this. Think of the Coen Brothers film, Serious Man, right? This idea of completely frightening academic context. So you've got to think about how your disposition and your sensibility and your intelligence can help you, and that can also maybe work against you. So that's a little bit to start with, but I'd like to do this exercise, leaving aside the last piece. I was picking up here on, so the first point here is, the J.Z. Smith thing that the syllabus is the most important academic document you'll ever write. So if the syllabus is that fundamental piece of academic work, its relationship to the class, I believe, is a little bit, perhaps, like the relationship of the mission statement to the curriculum. And so that's why I think if you've encountered a mission statement that was written seriously, it could be the same kind of document for the curriculum of the department as the syllabus is for the execution of the class. So that's, if you take this mission statement as a primary text, and again, I think we are 2 4, so we could work in pairs. why don't you try that exercise of, not the exercise that I have here, but the exercise I sketched. Again, I think I could read it again. Participants are asked to choose a department at an institution they imagine themselves wanting to join and read what's on the web about mission statement, curriculum, and larger institutional context. On the basis of this research, they should then write themselves into the department with a 3-year teaching schedule and sketch of committee service assignments. They should choose an institution they don't know firsthand, and then we can talk about this. So, is that all right? Can we do that now? I'd love it if we could. If you just work with a partner. Are you ready to come back? I mean, the thing to do would be it's up to you if you want to present both scenarios or pick one to talk about. I'd love to hear how this went and whether it was any use at all. I'm going to add a little coffee to my cocoa. Oh, thank you very much.
Is that enough? A little more?
Thank you. That's exactly what I need to. Yeah. Should we start here?
Sure.
Okay, it's Michael and Allison.
So I was looking at the University of Portland, which is a Holy Cross Catholic school, figuring that those are the schools that still require students to take ethics classes.
Is it Portland, Oregon?
Yeah, Portland, Oregon, University of Portland. So the supply and demand, I'm hoping I'll be able to get a job at some point. I was while the sort of overall mission statement of the school included sort of ethical reflection in it, which I think is great, and they do have a sort of expanding extra departmental ethical program. The theology department, where I think most of those classes are housed, had very much this like people have a Sunday school level of religion when they enter into the university. We're trying to amplify that somehow. So it struck me that the audience they're very much focusing on are Catholic students, and yet I was also struck by how boring the class like titles were. I'm not sure about the descriptions themselves, but I mean it's very much just the theological ethics, introduction to Christian ethics, and so I was hoping, while still fitting the need for some of those introductory classes, and knowing that my first year probably would just be taking over some of these type of courses, I'd want to both fit the needs that they're enunciating there, like doing something on the Catholic social teaching tradition, that documentary tradition and responses to it. But they have a really great joint thing going on where they're doing actual environmental ethics and policy majors. So trying to craft some courses that would sort of fit more into that while bringing in the religious element. So something on contested natures, environmental ethics and political ecology, sort of doing something that would be ethnography, ethics and policy making class that would specifically carve out a space for thinking about religious activists in that. And then, of course, I want to teach a class on sci-fi, fantasy, and ethical theory.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, and I'm thinking that I would try and position my courses so that I can get a lot of the people who are doing the gen ed requirements while still being attractive enough to maybe get them to continue into the program as a major. But that's it. Yeah.
Did you?
Oh, and service. They had a writing program, and I've been involved in the writing program here, so that would be one obvious thing. Their study abroad program had no programs in Africa, so I think I could maybe sort of try and get involved somehow with guiding the study abroad office towards.
I know that from personal experience. He was with my daughter in Rwanda, so. I want to ask one question. Oh, is there any? Are you able to tell how new courses are created?
I didn't have any.
Okay, it may not be easy to know from the website. Yeah. Okay. Before we continue, I just wonder if any of you resonated with some of the things Michael said about curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely.
What?
In particular, your comment about course titles. I remember years ago someone telling me that she had an awful time getting students in her modern Judaism course, and then called it the Holocaust, and suddenly enrollment was a waiting list of return. And I think in terms of the actual curriculum, she just expanded the Holocaust unit by a week or so. And so I wondered how much something like that shows just a change in naming practices, that whereas, Christian ethics or introduction to theological ethics used to be kind of maybe compelling or descriptive enough, now that the technique is more drawing out, a specific theme or a question maybe as a way of just kind of showing students like what this is really about. Maybe what used to be descriptive is no longer sufficing. I'm not really sure, but that's a question that I've been curious about myself.
It just strikes me that I think as we're trying to get hired somewhere, like they'll want to know that the courses you offer will be courses students want to take, right? Like, and maybe the way we name is sort of a way of another way we can set ourselves apart.
I'm also wondering, there must be some kind of institutional pressure to have such boring course titles. Is there some reason that on the website they want to say theological ethics? So I'm wondering how to negotiate. Do you do theological ethics : sci-fi? Is that so how do those both go?
It's a core issue, and it will depend on every institution will be different. But the strategy of smuggling in your course, if there's reluctance to change the name, you can that's what we all do. Smuggling your own course. Is that heretical? But do your thing.
Wigs and veils.
But when there's resistance, and there may also just be some inertia. That it may be resistance not for ideological reasons or theological reasons, but just that's the course we've always done, and so the sci-fi course, it would take 3 years to get through governance. So, but do the sci-fi course under the name of theological ethics or whatever. That's just another great. Allison.
I chose Oberlin College, which I found out this morning is your undergraduate institution.
It is, yeah.
And I looked at their religion department. In the curriculum overview, they say that their religious studies program involves 3 influential approaches: traditional, modern, cultural, and region-based. And then underneath all of those, they list different disciplines that would support those approaches. So I saw myself fitting in best under region-based and modern cultural, less so traditional, because I think I want to teach history of religion in America, and I think that I would want to include world religions within the history of religion in America. So I proposed some courses around that, and then I also saw my religion and literature potential coursework falling under the modern cultural area. One thing that I struggled with preparing these courses and thinking about what courses I want to teach is what it would be realistic. So what the course load might be for a year, and then over 3 years. I was thinking maybe 2-2 for a semester system, but I don't know if that's completely wrong.
I'm guessing Oberlin is 2-2.
Okay.
I don't know. Tech is, my department is, not the whole university, but my department is.
Postings usually say what they expect.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's also a consideration when teaching a number of courses.
And I guess more so with someone who hasn't had a whole lot of teaching experience, what would be practical over the course of the first 3 years at an institution? So I tried to think of courses that could be re-articulated into 2 different courses but have a lot of overlapping texts. So for instance, a World Religions in America course that could also be cast in terms of a migration and American religious history class, the emphasis being on migration in that case. In terms of committee and service assignments, that I struggled with. I think I haven't really had an eye toward how I might fit in that way. But just based on the religion department website, they list their senior capstone projects. So I thought I could mention being involved in that in some way, either on a committee or advising students. And then they also have yearly writing awards, several different awards for translations and other different kinds of writing projects. So I thought I could mention being on the selection committee for that.
That's a nice strategy. That is to say, I've done this. Here's what I bring to the possible service contribution based on that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Issues. I'm getting the sense also we should maybe name what you would like to know that you couldn't tell from the websites, and then maybe we should start collecting some of those things. I mean, a lot, I imagine.
Which courses were popular or were most popular? So what tended to have the highest enrollment? And I think that's something that we'd probably only be able to find out through talking to people, but it's sort of a sensitive topic, I imagine, too.
But it's a good one to ask as a candidate, I think, to indicate your sensitivity to the issue and the departmental priorities and needs. Yeah. I don't think it would be too sensitive, actually. At least it wouldn't be in my department's case, but it would be maybe in some. I mean, if it's known that some drudge is getting no students and courses are doing badly because of that person's bad teaching, that could be a sensitive one. Yeah, and it's a tricky question in an interview, just generally. What would you like to teach? Play that very carefully. Show your originality, show your flexibility, but also show your team play, show your eagerness to fit into the team. And you got to strike that balance. It's a trick question. I think it can be an unfair question to ask. If there isn't any statement in the job description. The job description is a legal document in a way that you should be able to treat as a guide, like the mission statement, to answering that question. But yeah, that's a tricky question. Tricky one. Great, thanks. You are? Diane.
So when I started this, I went by one that actually had like a job listing that I might actually someday be able to be employed by. And so Dayton College is looking for somebody who does religious studies, but is very interested in interdisciplinary work. And so since I work on film, it looked like someplace where I could maybe pair the two together, Religions in America, globalization, and film. Their mission statement is very adamant about their interdisciplinary work and requirement. They're also very adamant about innovation. So when you look at like their course listing, there's not a lot, but they do have courses listed like the Holocaust or culture and stories. So they didn't have a lot of the traditional ones, at least for the term that I was looking at, listed, and they look like they're down a faculty member. So the religious studies program is associated with the philosophy program. They say that they, allow you to go through the 5 big traditions, but also look for things like the Holocaust and medical ethics to pair those two together. So that looked like someplace that might be possible, but then I don't know how you negotiate in a job interview for a place like this the question of what would you want to teach, because if I wanted to teach something like the long 1960s via film, is that something they actually want to hear, or are they looking for the traditional answer also?
A safe bet is always to do a little beach, I want to do this bread and butter course, and I have great ideas. I'm really excited about this bread and butter course. Oh, and if it's possible, I can do these things also, if there's opportunity.
They have, like one page on here says there's like quote unquote no ivory tower. So yeah, but they have, yeah, and that's what I was like, I don't know what that means. But they have service and learning. So what they have their students do is go out and participate either in community service, or it looks like going out to learn what it means to volunteer for like a Democratic Party or engage within a civic environment coming from someplace where you really practice critical thinking skills. So whether that would mean I could participate in documentary filming, or at least motivating what a documentary filming would be like of less fortunate people to then pass that on, and is that a learning tool somewhere else? I mean, might be an option. I don't know if I know enough about filming to tell them how to do the filming as much as I could at least help them guide for a topic if they know the other part.
Very interesting. Yeah, and that's another service dimension to consider, just whole service learning and outreach and so on. My school is a land-grant university. Its mission involves this bit of outreach, and yeah, we we weigh that, we evaluate and assess it, and it's tricky though in our field, right? I mean, how do you do that? And we have a new dean who's an English professor, and I was saying to her the other day, well, we have a new way of doing ethics in the Gen Ed, and the idea was, oh, there'll just be ethics in everything. And she and I both think that's completely stupid. And the danger of it is that there's a kind of ethics of niceness at my school. The kids are really nice. They do a lot of this service. They're super nice people. And but that's not thinking.
Right.
And so, what do you do with that?
Yeah. The quotes of like the no ivory tower here. I mean,
yeah, you got to be careful there. You got to. I mean, it's up to you how you want to play that. But some places will be worried that you're too smart, that you're too bookish, so you need to kind of demonstrate you're a three-dimensional human.
So when I looked at their faculty, they did have somebody on their religious studies program before that had been, got their PhD from the University of Chicago, and he just recently, so I was like, well, at least I'm not, completely out of a running as long as it sounds like your understanding of like a service commitment in this university also.
And that can be a really great thing. What is the local community like there? I don't know.
Don't know. It's in Elmhurst, New York, so it's in, I don't know the New York area very well. Upstate New York.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the one thing to do would be to brush up a little on the local community. If you got the interview and you'd say, I noticed that there's this kind of local issue or this kind of community issue, and I'm curious to learn more about it, and that shows a certain kind of...
They do say they're also close to they're in a suburb, but they're close to Toronto, so I don't know how much of the metropolitan area of Toronto, if there's like an interest in the word I can't think of, as far as communicating with like Canada and that type of dynamic.
I can't say I looked extensively, but I did briefly look at the mission statement of Lafayette College in Pennsylvania, a small liberal arts school in Pennsylvania. And
Eric Zukowski.
Right. And I don't know, it just seemed kind of like a general, I can't even read it to you. Religion plays a central role in many areas of human life, from the individual quest for meaning and purposes in the broader arenas of social values, politics, and both conflict and cooperation among nations and groups. And I didn't get the sense that there was a statement about the kinds of, not only just the theories and methods that they were going to use to teach their students, but how they were being tied to the greater context of the university. It seemed like a pretty isolated department. You have your courses, your faculty, but not any tie to the broader life of the college, and also what the major gives to you, whether that's the sort of practical lens or the kind of
so how would you try to, it's vague, so how would you try to dig in and get more out of that or learn more? It's a liberal arts college, and it's well respected. Near Lehigh Valley, I guess.
We had a similar problem. We were looking at a mission statement, and it was just so vague.
Where?
At Dartmouth, I followed Dan's lead and looked at job postings. As a
Dartmouth.
Launching. And they had one, it had contributed everything, so be still about it. And the general mission statement for the school was like an intellectual culture and excellent students and individual thought and collaborative thinking. So I kind of had a thought that just sounded very banal, and I wasn't really sure how to incorporate that. But I think it's a really good idea that you could kind of present yourself as someone who could think through the way that they're trying to present themselves, and then translate that into the kind of syllabus and what the assignments would work. So you could tell students that we would practice debate or try to flesh out an argument and But that, yeah, so it seemed like a few steps from the banal. I didn't know what to do with that either.
The curriculum might be a clue, especially if there's I don't know how much of the curriculum major and the plan or the check sheet of the major might be available online, but sometimes you can get an indication from that what kind of story or outcomes they have in mind for the major. Is there a kind of intro? Is there a capstone? What kind of terms do they use to describe those? They may just be phoning it in on these mission statements. I'm guessing that's often true.
I mean, they do mention capstone projects and what students do afterwards, but it seems particular to the individuals involved and not some general trend that they see their students going through or particular skills that they acquire along the way.
You know, to some extent, the mission is something of limited use, probably. They're writing, some of these places write it as from a defensive posture to satisfy other readers, like the dean or the president or the provost. And so they'll do no harm, they'll be innocuous and use words like excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then you've got to develop other reading strategies to get what's going on. Of course, in person you'll be able to do that when you meet everyone, but in the time before that, it's tricky. But again, your curiosity about these things as a candidate will always be useful, I think. Always be useful.
This is what Maureen and I were talking about as well. Is like faced with these statements that are, so banal as to be troubling at times.
Yeah.
Well, it could also be an opportunity. And you were talking about reading strategies. Well, why not take these things as symbols and then let them feed your imagination? All right, they're interested in the creation of knowledge. Great, but what if now I'm doing a Byzantine art course and I'm talking, I can work into the course description that, icons aren't just representing reality, they're creating a new reality, they're generating thought as much as they're reflecting it. I don't know, but to take something as simple as a statement made in public for just political nicety and treat it as an opportunity.
I think that's great. Absolutely. It's a rhetorical opportunity. They put it out on the website. They probably voted on it. We did. And so it's something they should stand on it. And if you read yourself into it, if you write yourself into it, why not? Yeah, I like that. And one thing I'd be curious to know, if there's a debate now in the humanities between a kind of love of learning for its own sake, on the one hand, and an instrumentalist, defensive notion of providing skills that can be transferred or meaningful and applied. I'd be curious how you read these mission statements. Did you see Dartmouth as sounding like they're I don't know, they're probably not trying to show their usefulness, or is it more about knowledge for its own sake? But there are debates behind these things, and certainly at our school that's now there's this whole new idiotic motto of hands-on, minds-on, hands-on, minds-on, and so the new arts requirement is going to have people plunking on little drums or something in a class of 300. And are you kidding me? I said, you've got to teach them how to listen, how to read. So, but it's all about this sort of discourse of the applied, the discourse of the utility, of the instrumentalized. And so I'm just curious if that came up in any of these.
Yeah, definitely. Mine, and I imagine others are similar, had a section for students on why would you major in religion. Mm-hmm. And of course there's the line about how it's so applicable to careers in journalism and business and the medical professions and so on. And it really makes it seem like majoring in religion is kind of a prerequisite for doing something else. And so I wonder how much that seeps into the classes themselves. Like, here's an application to some other line of work. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the question that I was dealing with in terms of application. And the way it was phrased almost made it sound more like a kind of crib sheet for students in justifying their choice of major to their parents, maybe, or justifying the place of religious studies in the university more so than something that should be enacted upon in my classes.
Good, good. Yeah, that's a very important thing, and that's a crucial one in the decision of what major to choose. I mean, I think it's still true, and it was true when J.Z. Smith said it a long time ago, that our profession is not a profession of majors. Our profession has been, and it probably will continue to be a profession of service courses in terms of much of what we'll do in teaching undergraduates. And so, yeah, the case for the major will always be a tricky one, has been a tricky one. And so I wouldn't expect, except for certain important exceptions, the Catholic schools and a few of the arts colleges, probably, you wouldn't expect to be in a place where you're dealing with a huge number of majors.
Mm-hmm.
There's no high school curriculum to prepare for it. There's every reason to be afraid of it, and people get nervous about it. I told Matt and Maureen last night about a case of a transfer request. I have to review requests for transfer credit, and the course was from a school, an evangelical school. The course was on kind of agricultural treatment of animals somehow, and how to treat cows or chickens, or how to raise them or something. But it was all taught from a kind of creationist and a sort of a biblical standpoint. And someone in the ag school saw this request for course credit and bounced it over to me. And my reply was, whoever sent this to me has no idea. I mean, these are my colleagues. No idea what we do. The idea that somehow a course on animal husbandry that's taught from a creationist point of view should get religion credit at Virginia Tech at a state school. So we're dealing with that kind of, and that is a shame. What school did you look into?
I looked into Muhlenberg College just down the road from you in Lafayette.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
More about that?
Oh, sure. Do you want to kind of?
Well, yeah, and I just want you all to.
Yeah. So I thought that the mission statement it gave me a lot to work with. It talked about cross-cultural and multidisciplinary, being very analytical. It was very practical and talking about how the students analyze texts and beliefs, rituals, arts, communities, etc. So I felt like it gave a good sense of what the courses were all about. And something that tripped me up a little bit was it talked about how the students would analyze all these texts and beliefs and so forth in order to understand, quote, their integration into coherent worldviews. And I felt like the courses I had in mind, the courses I'd taken, always kind of ended up with a deeper appreciation of the complexities and the contradictions. So I thought, well, do they really want, at the end of the day, students to have a kind of package up of how this really is a coherent worldview, and in what ways can I respect my material and still respect a mission statement like this? The website was very informative. It actually talked about how the courses are divided. The 100 level courses are about the academic study of religion. There's a theory and method course. The 200 levels deal with specific religious traditions. The 300 levels deal with religious expressions and religion, person, and society. And there's descriptions of what this means. And then the 400 level courses are something that the college calls CUE, which is cumulative undergraduate education. And I'm needing to find out a little bit more about what that means. But the courses I put together, and this college has a 3-3 semester system, so there's quite a bit of courses. I'm sure some of them are taught on rotation, for example, Judaic traditions or Introduction to the Study of Religion. But I just kind of put down the courses that I had in mind, and it seemed like they all ended up in this 300 level, and maybe one would be a 200 level. It seems like the 1 and 400 level are more service type courses anyway. But I came up with courses such as Jews and Muslims in the Mediterranean world, or the history of Jewish biblical exegesis, or even something like the figure of Abraham in Judaism and Islam. So these really fit into the cross-cultural and multidisciplinary emphasis that was carried out in the mission statement.
Very rich.
Yeah, I don't think I appreciated quite how rich it was until I compared it to some of the other examples. But the mission statement seems to be something that they put a lot of thought into.
This is almost, one end of the spectrum, and it raises other issues. As you said, they have a clear idea, and they articulated it.
Mm-hmm.
But now the question is it one you feel comfortable with, especially this coherence?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And is that the sort of thing that I should bring up, say, in an interview context, or just sit on?
Is it a church-related school?
Yeah, its roots are with the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, but I don't think that that's really actively reflected in the religion department.
I wouldn't focus on it too much in an interview myself. I would I'd ask a KG question about it maybe, but I wouldn't put it out there too much. I'd be cautious, but I'd listen intensely.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a dean and a provost involved in this? Some schools, especially smaller schools, really will see a kind of coherent, an institutional vision of the curriculum from the top down even,
Mm-hmm.
and others will be quite anarchistic, and so that would be something to attend to.
Uh-huh.
Do they have a somewhat heavy hand in the guidance of the formation and the offering of the curriculum? And could that ever lead to issues of academic freedom for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if you felt there might be some challenge to your academic freedom or integrity, it should come up sooner than later.
Right.
I would say, but I don't know how often. It's usually not the case.
This whole question actually leads to something that we were talking about in our private discussion about how much of the content of the mission statement is sort of like an ideal, and how much of it is really needing to be implemented or even capable of being implemented.
Right. There will also be a strategic plan. There will be, as you saw, the curriculum. There will be the check sheets. So this is just one of many primary texts for you to read as someone looking at it. And what you'll also do and notice is you'll notice patterns. Like the service learning thing took off. It's a fad. Leadership is a fad that ran through higher ed for a while. You still see it, and so you'll also see a sort of a lot of echoes across schools of certain kinds of faddish, and I don't mean in a necessarily pejorative way, trends in higher education, and so then you might also be asking what aspirations here are a reflection of some kind of national trend or flavor. And again, with the professionalization of the administrative class in some schools. I mean, some schools have faculty administration, and others have people who really want to focus on administration as much as possible and not as much scholarship or teaching. With that trend, we see more of this kind of echo chamber across the different universities. So that's also just another thing to notice. Did you have a school, and your name is?
My name is Son Young, and the institution that I'm writing into is Yonsei University in South Korea.
Okay.
Which has a theology department in a secular setting university.
Okay.
And this university is a huge university which has medical school, law school, blah blah. So their mission statement is somewhat ideal and really ambitious, because they emphasize this institution is ecumenical theological institution, and they cultivate interdisciplinary education, and also they emphasize the church unity of church, and also they try to educate students who is balanced with both in study and faith, and also they try to nurture leadership not only for the Korean church but also global church. And they also strongly recommend to take a course in other departments, or even they recommend double major, so that student has a variety of experience and knowledge. So in this mission statement in mind, having this statement in mind, it's really difficult to design a course, especially as a student of New Testament and online Christian literature. I don't know how to cultivate global leadership or church unity or something like that. So, yeah. So basically, my course consists in some fundamentals, such as intro to the New Testament, biblical Greek, or Pauline letters, synoptic gospels. But also, I designed. I imagine a co-teaching a course on ancient rhetoric or Hellenistic philosophy with English teacher or philosophy teacher.
That's great.
Or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Now, that would really answer their interdisciplinary goal. But do you have a sense, it sounds like a pretty rich website and so on, but do you have a sense of what they mean by the balance of study and faith, or an ecumenical and interdisciplinary? It sounds like an
I
interesting...
think that comes from the history of this department, because it was established some 100 years ago as a mission school, but it's established by American missionary maybe. So it started strongly as a Christian school, but nowadays it's almost secular. So I think there's no denominational influence on the curriculum. So they are more leaning toward kind of research emphasis rather than producing some pastors or church leadership. But they didn't leave off that kind of mission statement because they still cherish their own history. So.
And when you said you were not sure how you would fit into the mission about preparing leaders and so on, how might you, being you, doing what you do, doing your thing, fit into that? I mean, let's say they ask you that in an interview. They say, well, we know you're a scholar, we know you know the primary texts and the secondary literature in your field, and we know you can teach those courses, but how does that fit into our mission as preparing leaders? What would you say?
The definition of leadership in Korea, I think, has a little bit different nuance from here in the US. I mean, we Koreans think leaders should have some good skills in English speaking or some global network or something like that. So I think by providing some course on theological English course or something like that may provide a great opportunity for students to practice their English reading skill as well as speaking skill too. But for the networking, maybe I am from University of Chicago. Maybe you will have better opportunity to reach some renowned scholars in study of religion. Maybe, yeah.
Nice. Aaron, did you want to say? I didn't really. Did you want to add your particular example, or do you want to?
I'm happy. Yeah. Unless Professor Rosenberg wants to say what he would like to teach. And Yeah, no, I'd be happy to go.
How are we doing on time?
It's 11:45.
Okay, when does this end? 12:15? Do we have another half hour?
Reserved until 12:30, but
Oh, great. We're only, we've got a lot more we can do, so.
So I chose Georgetown University, and much of the appeal there, and this would be the same at other institutions as well, is the Jesuit structure. I'm not myself Catholic, but the way that the Catholic University is organized and the relation of the theology department to the larger university I find really compelling. And one of the most appealing things about Georgetown to me is actually the basic core class that every first-year undergraduate takes, or I guess they're able to take it in their first 2 years. It's called The Problem of God, and it's a class that is truly core. So everyone in every department, it might be the only religion class that people take. You might be in it with people from across the university, and everybody in the department is expected to have a plan for teaching. They may not do it every year, but they have a section that they're able to do it. So I've taken that as a great challenge and something I would want to really embrace. I think, as you've already been saying at times, the eagerness to teach a bread and butter kind of course. But the nice thing about it is that everyone is expected to take their own approach to it. So I've thought through a course I call it Problem of God, Experience, Tradition, Authority. And so rather than take a sort of top-down philosophical approach, look at conversations or conflicts or test sites, test cases of the experience of God as a problem, traditions around God as a problem, authority, as segments doing here. I clearly haven't thought it through all the way down to what specific materials would be part of that, but I think there's something there. The department is really interesting. It's got a huge undergraduate program. It looks like 75 to 100 classes were taught last year in the theology department with very wide range. Hinduism today, religion and ecology, the church in the 21st century, Buddhist perspective on death and dying, death and afterlife, as well on theology and dogs.
So that.
I went looking at it.
Maybe you're a student from animal husbandry.
Would that course count at Virginia Tech?
I have a whole dog thing, but it's kind of a rant. It's another time. Personal, so.
So they have a very rich curriculum already, and it's one that their undergraduate program is anchored by the Problem of God course, which is for the whole university, not just for the major. The major has a couple of tracks, and I started seeing where I would fit into that. But then the PhD program is very small, but it's focused on religious pluralism, and so they are trying to set themselves apart in the top or more or less top tier of religious PhD programs in religion by having students have a major tradition and a minor tradition that they're focused in one area, but then they have a command of and qualifying examination in a second tradition. So they're looking both at comparative issues and the relationship between those two traditions that they've selected. So I think that's being able to talk about pluralism in a way that's authentic to the work that I do, which is really about this interreligious, the space between all the messy stuff, as opposed to maybe a more comparative approach that took traditions and set them up as conversation partners in the classroom, perhaps. But the kind of work that I want to do and the kind of teaching that I want to do is at the interfaces themselves. So in terms of teaching, I would maybe offer a course on interreligious ethics. That would, they do put an emphasis on ethics, and so it's not my core focus, but it's something I do have some qualification in. So that might be a way to both meet their expectation that this ethics program is really strong here. Well, here's something I do in academics that's relevant here. A class on the long globalization of Christianity that I've been thinking through, which is a history of Christianity survey, but takes the concept of globalization as its concept of globalization as its foundation, but look at how Christianity has had a global mentality in the ancient oikumene, moving, in missionary movements from the very beginning.
And they have Peter Fan there.
They do have Peter Fan there, yeah. No,
So
I know Peter.
but he's a really generous person. Have you met him?
I know Peter, yeah.
And he's so sweet. Yeah.
He's wonderful, and he already does. He's obviously plenty involved in these sorts of issues. But I think one of the interesting things about Georgetown is that there is not. They don't see it as redundancy. There are multiple people working on similar sorts of issues, and they take that as as an opportunity to build conversation. Class on images. My core tradition, if I were thinking of myself in their terms, my core tradition is Orthodox Christianity, which currently I don't see anyone teaching. So that's might be a nice opportunity. But I also want to be able to offer, Orthodox thought and practice isn't a terribly sexy title for a course. So I don't know how I might massage that course title to have it fit in with theology and dogs. Some of the more exciting.
If they have courses like theology and dogs, it sounds like there's flexibility. Some governance is very slow, and that can be one of the reasons why there's boring titles. And then some governance is very free, and that sounds like it might be kind of free, that they can just bounce an idea up there and do it. And you might be able to figure that out.
Yeah. But they also do have, Introduction to Jewish Life and Thought. So something like that with Orthodox thought and practice would certainly fit in the department. But that is something I would want to then be able to offer. In terms of service, like Michael, I'm teaching the writing program here and doing something with undergraduate writing. I suspect would be valued in a Jesuit context. Their mission statement is a lot about the creation and effective communication and this sort of thing. The theology area, there's that kind of Newman attitude towards the position of theology in the university as a kind of connective tissue that can wrestle with the big issues that everyone else is, confronted with. But
do you sense they're aware of the Newman sort of idea, the legacy of the theology as the central discipline of the university? Probably.
I suspect so.
I'm guessing they are.
Yeah.
How much do you think, as you're writing your mission teaching statement, like writing for a Catholic school, but coming out of the University of Chicago, would you want to say, I find Newman's particular thought to be influential?
If it's true, if it's an honest statement, those, again, that's another thing, the whole business of the dossier. I'm sure you've talked about this and think about it a lot. Those different schools treat those things differently. Some people want a teaching philosophy. Some people want a dossier that shows your evaluations, student evaluations. It varies. Some places really don't pay much attention to it. It just depends. But yeah, I would say things that are true and diplomatic at the same time.
Yeah.
And it seems like every one of our institutions is going to have a different, to a greater or lesser extent, explicit relation to their own religious heritage, the religious heritage of the institution, whether it exists or whether it is explicit or implicit. At a Catholic institution, I'd want to be able to come in with, I work on ecumenical issues and interreligious issues, and I'm not Catholic, and working in a Catholic institution is very appealing in part for that reason. There's to participate in this dialogue. And I know at Georgetown that's taken seriously already. I don't think that'll be an uphill battle, but I imagine it might be at other kinds of institutions. Likewise, I might, want to not mention the word ecumenical in an interview at a school where that was a red flag.
And yeah, please, other.
A follow-up question. You both mentioned teaching writing as a form of service. Can you argue that in an interview that like as a course component, or are you imagining teaching writing as a different sort of thing that you'd be involved in perhaps the writing center in some way, or maybe like it's a similar kind of service to teaching introductory courses that as a younger faculty member you'd be willing to teach these sort of basic departmental offerings? I'm just wondering, like in terms of using the language of service, how is that related to teaching writing?
Is the work that you both do part of the undergraduate, what used to be called the Little Red Schoolhouse, or the writing program, such?
The same training for the people who are teaching the Little Red Schoolhouse, but applied just to freshmen, whereas the Little Red Schoolhouse is typically for advanced students.
I see.
So we're attached to the humanities core curriculum.
Okay.
But in terms of service, and I was conceiving it openly, like if there's a writing, the writing center to have, if they need faculty mentors, that's do introductory, courses with heavy writing components. At Swarthmore they had W courses that had a little W next to them that just and you had to take at least 3 of them during your time there.
We had that, the writing intensive requirement. Each student needs so many of those to graduate. So that might be, it's a credential. You have this credential, and you how it plays out. But it's an interesting question how that would play out. It wouldn't be, eventually, again, what I meant about service was sort of, think 7 years in the future. You're going up for tenure. At least at our place, the tenure dossier is composed of many documents, but the most important document is the personal statement. What I would like for all of you to be able to say is what we always try to have our dossiers say. My teaching, research, and service are holistically connected. I have this overall passion intellectually, and here's how I work that passion out in my life, professionally in my research, my teaching, and my professional and university service. And maybe outreach is a third category that's related to service. It depends on where you are. So that's really kind of one of the things I'm arguing and driving at today is that the last thing on the page, and I'll come back and maybe we'll go through some of the other things if you want, is let your Chicago flag fly. I mean, be you, do you, but do you in the new context and use your same talents for reading and discerning that you have here actively and socially as well as textually to figure out what is this new institutional context and how you can fit in. But that could be a sort of ultimate kind of vision for yourself, that it's really nice to be able to say that, the work you do in the committees that you've chosen to be on. I mean, the thing I say to colleagues is that service work can't get you tenure, first of all, at least not at my school, and I hope not at where you end up. And it's abundant. It's like cafeteria food. There's plenty of it to go around, and so you need to be able to discern where and how to say yes to service opportunities. Now, sometimes you just have to do it because someone has to take their turn doing the scholarship or doing the curriculum committee or the executive committee. But even in doing your turn, you can figure out how your intellectual vision sort of contributes to that. And it's really nice to be able to say, not only am I too busy to do this, sorry, but also I don't think I have the talents for that, and I think I can make a better contribution in the other committee or whatever that is. So that's kind of what but yeah, that service thing, again, you shouldn't have to do a lot of service when you start, but it isn't too early to think about who you are in that group and how your voice will matter. Now, sometimes people feel left out because they're told not to do service. So that's another dynamic to think about as well.
Can I ask about I'm curious if any of you had any experience with a religious studies honor society for undergraduates? I saw this at Muhlenberg. I'd never heard of such a thing before, but I imagine that would be a service opportunity to be the faculty sponsor of that club. But it seemed like a very active club. I think it was called like Kappa Theta Alpha, maybe Alpha, and it was like an undergraduate religious studies honor society that seemed to do a lot of activities together.
That would be an interesting thing to choose. And they'll probably want newer, younger faculty to be sponsors, faculty advisors of student organizations like that, as opposed to older ones. And maybe that's a nice opportunity.
I just had never heard of it, that kind of thing before. I didn't know if anyone else had.
There are many student organizations on any campus, and many schools will require a faculty sponsor. And that's another kind of, if you like that kind of thing, if you like working with students in a co-curricular way, that could be a nice thing. If it just means tailgating with them, maybe not, or raking leaves, but if it's somehow an opportunity to continue your intellectual work in a holistic way, maybe that's good. Yeah.
This is another question. How often do you see people who are doing joint sort of admin, curricular type stuff, and where they're somehow involved in administration but also still teaching?
Oh, that's I haven't been looking at the market, so I don't know whether that's actually something that you get hired into from within a job, or whether that's something that is already sort of being offered at that ground level. Many schools still have the idea of faculty governance and faculty administration, and so the idea at our place from the department head level down is faculty take their turn, faculty take a turn at this, and then they go back to their work. And even in my case, I have time to teach while I'm doing the department chair stuff. Some of the administrators at the dean's level and above at Virginia Tech are career administrators who have really left the classroom and the lab or the library behind. Yeah. And some are, like me, doing their turn or taking a turn for a period of time. So it varies. And I mean, that could be, and there are people like this, right, who just have a gift for administration. And I think Rebecca Chop is one of them. She's coming next, right? But she's an intellectual. I mean, so it's good that she's, doing administration. Probably she even finds time to teach. The current president of Tech doesn't teach. The previous one did teach a course every semester. The dean currently doesn't teach, but she probably wants to. Okay. Does that answer the question? Yeah. But there is this class, this new and growing class of people who prefer administration to the classroom and to research. And there is increasingly a labor market for that kind of person. And you can see that particularly at the higher administration level. Yeah. And one of the things to watch for is the rhythm of that market, so that, for example, is this person who just arrived as dean or provost seeing my institution as a stepping stone? In which case, that person might be planning to roll out some brand or initiative, not unlike what you see in the private sector, in order to put his or her name on it and then move on. Or is this person someone who is really going to throw energy into the realities of the institution and commit to them and spend hard hours working on making it a better place? So those are certain things too. Yeah. So.
Can I just follow up on that? So if the administrator is one way or the other, how does that impact the professor's work and connection to that person and use of that person as a resource and so on?
It's usually not directly. Okay. Usually not directly. It's just a way of in a way, the thing about uncertainty, and on the handout, is something you will always live with. What is the future of the institution, of the college, of the department, of my position? Those things will always, you are all smart enough to imagine scenarios that are scary for those futures. And so it's a question of managing the uncertainty and sort of discerning where you think winds are blowing on the large scale of things. You should be insulated from those things. But let's say at a smaller or medium-sized institution where there's a really active dean or department head with an initiative of the sort I'm describing, ask yourself, is this an initiative with depth and seriousness to it, or is it a kind of Potemkin village cosmetic project in order to burnish the CV to the next? And your decision might be, and the person will see you're this sort of new person, I want you to be part of this new initiative. So you might be in a position of needing to choose or think through or read the situation, whether your participation in this is a good investment of your time. Is that? Yeah. And again, that's a somewhat dim perspective, but there is reason to be, the hermeneutics of suspicion will serve you well, as long as you don't, let it run away from you, I think. Would it help to go through a couple of these other points? I'll be very selective. I don't want to simply do every one of them. I wanted to, on the curriculum point, I did want to make this this last point about teaching against the curriculum. It goes back to Michael's thing in the discussion we had about the boring course title and your example of the Holocaust course and so on. You have to teach against the curriculum. You inherited this course, and you have to make it your own. You can't do a good job otherwise. So don't feel the students are lucky to have you. You know a lot, and you are a great resource. What they will remember isn't the information. They will remember your passion and how challenged they were by your passion. So the curriculum is yours. Once you get in that classroom, most institutions will honor your academic freedom to teach the sci-fi course under the systematic theology title within limits. I certainly have even answered, as a leader, I've answered student complaints with that kind of point. And you'll want to know if your department head has your back. But I've had students come to me and say, this person, I took the class thinking I'd get information about X and Y and Z, and all we're doing is talking about post-colonial this and that. And I said, yeah, you're welcome. That's what you're welcome to have that. So be sure you have that support, but in most cases, I believe you will.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. We'll move on. Assessment. Just a couple of points. This is increasingly a fact of your life. You probably will be asked, even as an early scholar, to participate in some kind of assessment of what's going on in your department. There is more and more emphasis on measurable learning outcomes, and these kinds of things matter for how resources are distributed at schools, and particularly in the humanities. I suggest reading about this and learning about it. The action verbs thing, I'm not sure you're familiar with this, but nowadays it's typical when you write a syllabus that you have to write course objectives, and the course objectives must be written using certain kinds of action verbs that can be, that refer to measurable, observable behaviors. So by the end of this course, the student will be able to demonstrate X, X, Y, Z, perform this, so you've got to know about that, because from the course all the way up to the minor and the major and the gen ed curriculum, there's going to be more and more assessment as time goes on. For us in the humanities, we have to play both games. We have to play the yes, we'll assess game, but we also have to challenge and question the terms and the assumptions of assessment. I mentioned to Maureen and Matt last night this beautiful essay by Judith Butler in the book over here that I think is in my bag. Fairly new book called The Humanities in Public Life. She has the anchor essay in this collection, and there's a beautiful meditation on a new word. The word is deliverable at the end of her essay, and it's hilarious. It's funny, but it's deeply insightful. This word does get used now. What are the deliverables of your program? By the way, it's much worse in the United Kingdom than it is in the U.S. So assessment is very important. Judith Butler's response to the problem is refreshing. It's sort of spiritually uplifting. I don't know if she really has any concrete agenda, or we can't all be Judith Butler, so I don't know. But I do suggest it as a beautiful thing to read. Assessment, teaching assignment, or teaching load. I say, why is it teaching load? And again, I already mentioned these points. I ask, interdisciplinary teaching, that was one of the things you asked me to talk about. Is it avoidable, really? I don't think so. Do you have to talk about interdisciplinarity? Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you don't have to tell the students who aren't really readers of Dilthey what interdisciplinarity is. They're not burdened by the boundaries and the silos and the histories of discipline. So I don't think you really have to talk about interdisciplinary in the undergraduate classroom, but I think you do it, and any good teacher does it. You just don't always have to name it. I don't think I have time to go into this whole long, really could be another paper about, from critique to criticism. This would be another conversation, but for me, thinking about the field, in my own work, I find it more fruitful, and again, I'm showing my own religion and literature background, more fruitful to practice critical reading and criticism than I do to attempt systematic critique. And I've been reading some things about that that are mentioned here, and it would be fun to talk more about that. But some of the new discussions of critique, and I'm thinking again about my colleague Abe Sekura, who has analyzed critique through a kind of lens of Schmittian politics and decisionism. He takes a sort of etymology of the word critique and then relates it to the idea that, in a way, to critique is to decide, and there's a sovereign decision being made in the act of critique. And so, influenced by that and by readings by Hugo Ball and Kant and Luther that I'd love to talk about some other time, I find myself more and more happy and comfortable with criticism as opposed to critique, if that makes any sense, and kind of living and embodied practices of criticism. And a really great example of that is Butler's 3 pages on that word, deliverable. There's no systematic critique there, but there's beautiful criticism. A couple things about my institution, though, again, I didn't want to focus on that, and we don't have time to, and I'm happy about that. It's the second biggest school in Virginia. It's a hybrid of different kinds of missions. It was started in the 1870s after the Civil War as a military institute. So a kind of lost cause, rebuilding kind of mission, and it still has a corps of cadets to this day. It's also a land-grant school, and so that it has this kind of agricultural and technical and outreach purpose that is serving the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that plays out, as I already mentioned, in terms of a commitment to service of various kinds and measurable accomplishments that help the Commonwealth. Every year I fill out a faculty activity report, and I'm asked how many patents I created over the course of the year. But it's a standard template. So that's a little bit about the school. We're moving, and I think this is true of the humanities, but we're a sign of this, from the STEM H model to STEAM. Do you know what STEAM is? The A is for arts. We created an arts center. We have strong arts programs. We have great creative writers, some of whom you may have heard of, and good visual arts and theater programs. So now we're at STEAM H. STEM, do you know what STEM is? Yeah, okay. So STEAM H, and now I think the next move will be the second H of the humanities will be added. I think we are going to see nationally a return to high enrollments in humanities courses. The temporary lull, it may not return to where it was, but the temporary lull was a reflection of the economic crisis and the instrumentalist debates, political debates in the country. I think we'll see a bit of a turnaround. We're already seeing a bit of a turnaround in that, but it's going to take time. We've been through a lot of changes. Again, it's a long story, but we are now the Department of Religion and Culture, and we are the only Department of Religion and Culture in the United States. There is one, I think, in Canada. I'm really proud of our mission. I have handouts if you want a brochure, and excited about it, the potential of it, and our curriculum is pretty new. We have, I'll give you, if you want, don't take one if you don't want it. Each one costs about $1. Our curriculum really does, I think, successfully pull together the questions about what you do in the study of religion with broader questions or different questions about the nature of the study of culture. We have historians, we have anthropologists, we have scholars of religion, and we have some people who do a lot of outreach work. We have an Appalachian Studies program. It includes, our department has the oldest building on campus and just got a humanities grant to interpret the slave quarters of that building. So there is this kind of outreach work that goes on, regional. There's a really beautiful new project in our region of Virginia called the Crooked Road. It's a musical heritage road, and our department is involved in it. So all the way from that to the kind of theoretical work that others of us do. I'm on the more theoretical end of things. Ave Sacra, the guy I cited a moment ago, pure theory, nothing practical there at all. And somehow it kind of works. So what one of the funny things about it is that it's a land-grant research university that's STEM heavy, and the humanities can flourish in that context. And so I find that really interesting and, in a way, kind of hopeful in the sense of thinking about our discipline generally.
So sometimes the religion and ... is a result of a fusion of different departments. Is that the case with yours? And how does that...
Not exactly, but sort of, yeah.
Sometimes it seems that gives rise to sort of just putting the silos now under one budget that they fight over. And
very keen insight. Absolutely true.
I'm curious as to whether you had to deal with that or whether there was
I
more.
control the budget. That's the short answer.
So admin, it's one way to make sure that the religion departments continue.
I mean, my predecessor was a nicer person than I am, but didn't really have an investment in the and of religion and culture. I have an investment in the and toward not integration at all, really, but toward a certain kind of collective growth and collective improvement. And so we'll see if it works. It could be canceled any time, but and it's new, and then there are pressures. But it's you're quite right. Now, one thing that's historically interesting, which of you had the Department of Religion and Philosophy that you looked at? You. So we were religion and philosophy. Philosophy moved more and more in the direction of analytic philosophy and philosophy of science. Very good department. this was before I arrived at Tech, it made less and less intellectual sense for our people to be part of that department for a couple of reasons. They were no longer interested in courses on Tillich, courses on continental philosophers or thinkers or religious thinkers. Meanwhile, we were drifting a little more toward culture ourselves and a little bit less, a little bit away from those sort of thinkers who were at the meeting place of religion and philosophy. And so it made much more sense, and continues to, for us to be religion and culture. And I think that's a national tendency also. I think our field has moved a little bit away from the sort of, oh yeah, let's read these kind of interesting, smart philosophy, theologian type people. It's all very important and good work, and I do that, but it's less and less the case that philosophers will even respect or honor the work done on those thinkers. So that would be something also to observe in your time and see what happens next. Yeah, does that? Yeah. But I also have this. The budget thing is true. I meant it, and that was a big part of the thing. Luckily, we have a budget surplus right now. We have a lot of money, and I've got a problem because I have to spend it by June 7th, and our bookkeeper will kill me because you can't carry it over.
Of course. And then they'll probably reduce your budget the subsequent year because you clearly didn't need it all.
Yeah. Again, it's a game, and again, I find it kind of fun to play this budget game and learn about it. But I have the luxury of having a little bit of attention at this stage of my life for that kind of stuff. No reason you should worry about those things to administer them, but there's every reason to listen and observe and read about those things. I put all these goofy sort of statements at the end. I do mean it. Use everything. Release your interdisciplinary pre-curricular. Everything around you in the institutional environment is worth your attention, and you'll be happier and better off the more you understand what's going on around you, and you'll have more sense of inclusion and more sense of participation when you do that. The attitude thing, again, I've seen this in a lot of my friends and myself from Chicago. It's Festivus. Every day is Festivus for them. Do you know the reference? Okay, it's a Seinfeld.
The rest of this.
Hostile, sort of angry, disappointment. But cynicism is comforting, and so be suspicious of your own cynicism. And again, I've seen this in myself and others. Say, well, they're all so stupid. They're all such assholes. I'm better than that, and I'm insulted by the stupidity of this institution or this administrator. Try your best to keep that under control. It'll be there. It'll be sort of a low simmer all the time, but just see how you can play with it. Be playful with it, and that's my final piece of advice is to think about how you can sort of channel those your talents in productive ways in whatever institution you find yourselves in. This was a really helpful exercise for me. I really enjoyed hearing and learning about what you looked at. What else? Any other questions? I'm happy to stay longer. I really am free to be here. So
I'm just curious. I noticed your brochure. It's for the Bachelor of Arts. Is there any graduate education in the department?
Yeah. So if you're interested, and I only have 4 of these. I just was lazy, but help yourselves. Here's what we have. So the college I'm in is called the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences. It used to be called the College of Arts and Sciences. They split the natural sciences off. And we were left with the humanities, social sciences, the School of Education, and a couple of other odds and ends, including things that don't much fit, like the ROTC programs, which don't grant degrees, and the human nutrition, not the human nutrition, basically the home ec, what's today called something else, but it's basically like an interior design, kitchen design or something. And so there we were as a new college for the last 12 years or so, and the same provost who divided us into this new college also encouraged the building up of the graduate programs across the university. And so he created, and I participated in a PhD program called Aspect. I didn't get into that today. It's a kind of it's a Virginia Tech style version of, a little bit like the kind of Committee on Social Thought. Interdisciplinary, theory-heavy PhD program. We have some pretty good, smart theory people in political science, a couple in our department, philosophy and history are the other two departments. So instead of giving all these departments their own PhD program, which is probably a bad idea for anyone these days, the idea was to create a small and elegant PhD theory program. Aspect stands for Alliance for Social, Political, Ethical, and Cultural Thought. There's some really good people, and I've been part of hiring some really good people. My colleague in Islamic Studies got her degree at SOAS in London, and now has published a book with Stanford about modern, contemporary Islamic thinkers in Egypt. But she's also reading Talal Assad and Hussein Adrama, and she's just doing great, interesting work. So that PhD program has actually been an opportunity for people in relatively small humanities, social science departments to work with doctoral students. And I'm currently advising 2, and on committees of 3 others, and it's just been a joy. So that's one thing. The big state university or the STEM-heavy institution can still be a place where there are these pockets of interesting work going on. And so that's the PhD program. The master's program is this other kind of fancy, interesting hybrid shared with the School of Visual Arts, which is actually a different college. And we get into budget fights over that even this week because the funds come from different sources, but it's called Material Culture and Public Humanities. And I'm teaching a course, I'm teaching this book in a course I'm teaching right now on public humanities in the public sphere to the MA students. These are MA students heading for careers maybe at a museum, maybe in broadcasting, maybe in some kind of NGO or a PhD program beyond that. And so we have this, again, kind of a boutique MA program that's described in this card that went around. And it's been, again, another fun experiment. It's new. So it's does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of emphasis everywhere now in higher ed on innovation. So your novelty, your talents for innovation will always be welcome where you go. And at the same time, make sure you understand where you're going. So your ability to, we've hired, I'm embarrassed to say, quite a few Chicago graduates at Virginia Tech. And it's partly the fact that there is this opportunity to teach graduate students, and because it's a research institution that we've been able to bring really talented people.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but Maureen and I would like to give a big thank you to Professor Britt for his insightful and informative discussion.
We thank you for listening to or viewing our podcast. For more information and for other podcasts, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts. Copyright, the University of Chicago Divinity School.